Basements are where we keep things we don't want to see every day. Old boxes, the holiday decorations, that broken lamp. But what if something was hiding back there the whole time? These are 4 basement encounters that will make you lock your doors and listen to every creak. I'm telling true accounts, the kind people still wake up thinking about years later. Real basements, real fear. 4 stories you won't believe, each one starting ordinary and ending with a question that never goes away. When I was 24, I had just moved into my first house. It was the kind of place you find when you're ready to convince yourself you've got life figured out. A little yard, an old furnace that clanked in winter, and a basement that felt like another room entirely. The owner before me had subdivided it with sheets of plywood, like a makeshift maze for storage. There were folding tables, stacks of boxes, and narrow paths that led deeper into darkness. It was practical. It was normal. Until one night it wasn't. I remember that night clearly because the lights were already on when I came down to do a load of laundry. The hum of the washer was a steady, boring comfort. Then I saw movement. Not a shadow sliding across a wall, but someone crouched low behind a folding table staring back at me. We locked eyes. He was a man, hunched, still, and something in the way he held himself felt like he was waiting, like he was part of the house now, acclimated to the smells of old cardboard and dust. When our gaze met, he didn't run toward me. He ducked deeper into the maze. I'm not proud of this, but surprise made my legs move long before my brain caught up. I tripped over a box and hit the floor hard. In that second, before I scrambled up, everything changed. The overhead lights snapped off. The basement went pitch black, the kind of black that swallows sound. I could hear my breath loud in my ears, and then I felt it. The tug on my shirt, the dragging pressure of an arm. Something grabbed me with a strength I didn't expect. I fought. The instinct was all muscle and noise. I flailed toward the stairs. For a moment I can still feel the way my palms slid on the wood of the step, and how close the top was, like a promise. Something tried to pull me the other way, away from the stairs, as if whatever was waiting down there didn't want me to leave. I remember thinking in some very narrow place in my mind that if I didn't get up those stairs right, then it wouldn't be a story I would later tell. There would be no later. I managed to surge free and slammed the upstairs door hard. I put my whole weight against it and prayed, not in any religious way particularly, but in the way you plead with a door to hold. On the other side, something pounded, heavy, rhythmic hits, the sound of a fist against old wood. The door shuddered, then it stopped. It started again. The pounding grew frantic, then resigned, then distant. Eventually, sirens came. Neighbors, someone who had called when they heard the crash, and the police showed up. They found a window in the basement, one of the older, narrow ones with a latch that gives if you put pressure on it, and it was forced open from the outside, soil still freckling the sill. There was no sign of theft. Nothing was missing. The officers there told me, cautiously, that in their experience some people live in basements. They called it a theory, told me it was possible someone could have been hiding in there for days. I was told to consider myself lucky, and I suppose I should have felt that way. But I didn't. In the months that followed, I moved out. I still wake sometimes, even now, to the memory of being halfway pulled into the dark. The narrator believes the intruder intended to kill, but I can only say what I felt in those moments. My life was very nearly taken under a house I had just started to call mine. If you want more real-life horror like this, subscribe. There's more where this came from. When I was 14, my parents left for a weekend, and my older sister, who was supposed to be home, canceled at the last minute. The house was the same quiet suburbia you see in movies. Trimmed hedges, streetlights that buzz at night, and a feeling that nothing bad happened there. I was alone with the TV and a bowl of cereal. That stage-set sort of evening when your brain wants to be bored but your stomach disagrees. It started as a faint, almost polite tapping on the siding outside. I thought it was a branch at first, or maybe a raccoon, but the sound moved. I watched the corner of the wall where the light from the kitchen window fell, and the taps crawled along it, slow and deliberate, like someone testing the distance between them and me. Then the tapping came from below. A soft repeating knock just under the living room floor, where our basement windows sat like eyes looking out. I had my phone on me and I remember the way the screen glowed. I thought for a second about the movie logic of it all and cracked the window a fraction, angling the camera through the little slit with the flashlight on. In the tiny, grainy beam I filmed for maybe 30 seconds, holding my breath so the camera wouldn't shake. The picture shows a figure standing under one of the basement windows on the inside. Not a shadow and not an animal. A person, facing the glass, motionless. My hands were shaking so much the image is blurred in parts, but you can see the outline, the sense of shoulders. I still have that video, the way it breathes with me when I open the file. I locked myself in my room and called my mom first, then the police. From upstairs I could hear it getting louder, banging against the basement door now, not just the window, as if the person had moved from the sill to the frame and was trying every way to get inside. The officers who came later took my phone and that recording seriously. They said the footage helped them treat it as more than a prank. They searched. They found no one. The door from the basement to the backyard had been forced, the latch bent back. And later, after we'd all tried to sleep and failed, my mother opened the knife rack in the kitchen and discovered the largest knife was gone. We weren't sure if it was connected, if the same hands that tested the windows had decided to take something that could have been used to threaten. The police took what evidence they could. No arrests were made. I remember the way my house felt smaller after that, how stairs seemed less like passage and more like escape. The narrator describes the footage as what convinced the police to take the case seriously. But at the end of the night, at the end of our explanations, the main thing left was missing. Answers. You go from being a kid alone on the couch to a kid who knows there was a person under their house. That knowledge lingers. If you thought that was scary, wait until you hear this next one. When I was 16, our finished basement was where we lived in the summer. Family room on one side, an old sofa that slept more people than it was meant to on the other, a TV, and a little corner for storage that had small rooms for tools and old holiday boxes. It was the hangout spot for friends. We played video games there, watched dumb late-night shows, and always left a light on because no one liked the idea of the basement going totally dark. Our cat, Rocky, loved the basement. He slept under the couch, he batted at the chips that escaped our hands, and he didn't like being upstairs for long. One evening, I invited my girlfriend at the time, Malene, over. We made popcorn and had that low-commitment kind of comfort you want when you're 16, and everything is beginning to feel like something larger. Midway through a game, there were noises from the storage rooms. A rustling like someone riffling through plastic, thudding as if boxes were being pushed aside, and then something small and stupid rolled across the floor. A foam football. It knocked against the couch and bounced under the lamp. At first we laughed. I told myself Rocky had knocked it over. Cats do that, they're chaos. Then, like a line being pulled taut, the noise settled into something deliberate. I went to call Rocky by the soft hiss that meant treat or come here. No Rocky. Moments later we heard the scratch at the back door, and then with a sound that made the blood in my neck go cold, Rocky started clawing at the upstairs door like a trapped animal. He was upstairs. He was literally clawing on the other side of the house. So whatever had been moving down there couldn't have been Rocky. I grabbed Malene's hand and dragged her up the stairs with me. We slammed the door and held it shut for a long time while my hands shook so hard I thought I might drop my phone. We called the police. By the time they came, they searched every nook of the basement and the yard. There were no signs of forced entry. The windows in the basement were locked from the inside. The officers scratched their heads and offered theories. Maybe someone had sneaked in through the garage or a shed. Maybe it was a guy looking for a place to sleep and ran when he heard us. But the narrator is sure that the intruder didn't leave by the garage. The way the noises happened and the physical evidence of the football rolling and Rocky being upstairs made sense to me in a way the police report didn't. They left, and the house felt the way it does in movies right after the lead character thinks they're safe, and then hears the single slow sound that means they aren't. You start to question every shed, every hollow sound of your plumbing, every time the basement light flickers. The family argued about this for a while, some saying we should have called more, some saying we were adolescent drama. But I know what we heard that night in a finished room that was supposed to be our safe place. No arrests, no real explanation, just the knowledge that something was in a place where it didn't belong, and that despite the logic of locked windows and police patrols, someone still found a way. This next one is quieter, but it got into me and stayed there longer than the louder moments ever did. I was about 9 years old, and the family basement was my kingdom for video games, and the kind of solitary freedom you get as a kid. It had that boiler room feel in the back where the laundry machines lived, the place adults never went if they could avoid it. The light there was dim. The bulbs were always a little tired. I played late sometimes, the glow of the TV painting the low ceiling in blue. At that age, the basement is where you think monsters live, not because of anything you saw, but because of how the shadows gather around the furnace. In the middle of a game, I heard the laundry room door creak open. That groan of metal on wood is not the same as any other noise. It has a presence. Then I heard a sound that made the room stop for me altogether. A moan, but not just a moan. Something like my mom making a sound in pain or surprise, the kind of syllable that wakes you up right away. I stood up and walked toward the laundry room because at 9, you go to see who needs help. And there, framed in the doorway and thin as a silhouette, was a person's outline. I screamed. I ran upstairs. I remember the fluorescent lights in the kitchen as being too bright after the basement's gloom. Upstairs was clean and safe and smelled like coffee and detergent. I told my parents in a rush that someone was in the laundry room, that they needed to see. They told me to breathe and that it was probably a friend playing a prank. Debbie, who was a visitor that week, had done silly things before and could make noises that sounded like other people. The adults laughed it off enough to calm me down, and Debbie was introduced as a joker who liked to get reactions. Time, for them, fixed the feeling. But years later, when the thing had cooled from immediate panic into a memory I examined like a bruise, I started asking questions. I found an obituary for an aunt named Debbie. The obituary said she had died years earlier, and more unsettling, relatives talked quietly in ways that suggested she had been troubled, mentally unstable, maybe even dangerous at times. The family's explanation, that a visiting friend had made the noise, didn't line up with the fact that the woman the adults named was dead. The narrator later finds an Aunt Debbie who is dead, and reportedly had a history that made the explanation feel like a dodge. I was left with the sense that either someone had pretended to be someone they weren't, or the adults had covered something up, or worse, that some of what we call pranks are ways families avoid saying the words that hurt most. The basement in that story was small, but the secret it held was big. You look at your parents differently after that. You realize they sometimes choose comforting explanations over difficult truths. For me, the worst part wasn't the figure in the laundry doorway. It was the silence afterward, and the way adults wrapped a story in a neat, harmless bow so the child inside them kept sleeping. What ties these 4 tales together isn't just the darkness. It's the betrayal of a place we believe is safe. Basements are meant for storing things we aren't ready to toss. But when someone else is stored there, when a stranger shares your plywood paths or hides under your windowsill, the house changes from shelter into a trap. It's that uncanny familiarity. The intruder who knows the roots, the noise that mimics a loved one's voice, the cat that betrays your assumptions, that makes it harder to explain away. After each of these events, the aftermath plays out in stages. There is the immediate rush, the slamming of a door, the pounding on wood, the flood of adrenaline. Then there is the practical, the police visit, the evidence bagged, the questions that need answers. Finally, there is the long game, the slow erosion of certainty. People move out, families whisper. The narrator in the first story moved 2 towns over. The teen in the second kept the grainy phone video and watched it on bad nights to remind herself that what she'd seen was real. The 16-year-old who dragged Malene upstairs still can't shake the image of the football rolling without a visible culprit. And the child who saw the outline in the laundry room grew up learning how adult explanations can be the quietest places to hide a truth. You may ask, what could they have done differently? It's easy to be armchair safe after the fact, keep the light on, install cameras, never be alone. But these are human stories, full of small choices who had no way of knowing they mattered until the moment they did. Leaving a basement light on can be a comfort. Slamming a door can save you. Calling the police is necessary. But none of those things erase the feeling that you can be in your home and not be alone. There is also something more complicated here. The idea that basements are liminal spaces. They are not quite outside, not quite inside. They are the belly of the house, the place that stores yesterday. For whatever reason, whether it's the geometry of pipes and crawl spaces or the way we ignore that room, basements invite presence. Whether that presence is human, animal, or something we can't name, none of these stories prove one way or another. What they do prove is that the basement is a place your home carries that, under the right circumstances, can carry danger too. I've told you 4 accounts. I didn't say I knew all the answers. I said these were real testimonies. And like most real testimonies, they leave a residue. Facts, fragments, and an ache that some doors should have stayed closed. If you've got a basement, check your windows. Listen to knocks that feel wrong. And if you've ever been in a basement and felt watched, or heard a voice that shouldn't be there, leave a comment below and tell your story. You won't be alone in the telling. Drop your own basement encounter in the comments, like if you made it through without looking over your shoulder, and subscribe for more true stories. Keep your lights on tonight.